so sick of being made to feel like I'm running a hotel. I live in the center of a major city and I'm lucky enough to own a house with a guest room. Normally, I'm pretty happy to have house guests, but the past 10 days have been over the top. 4 different guests, all of whom asked if I could put them up. Note, I hadn't invited them myself. Change of bedding each time, 3 meals a day for some of them, use of washing machine, beer, wine, etc., etc. Not a single one of them arrived with even so much as a jar of jam. When I mentioned to one that I thought we'd order in some food one night, she said, "Great, my treat," and sat beside me while I looked through DoorDash. I asked her to choose what she wanted first, so I could be sure not to order something more expensive. But it didn't matter, because she didn't pay. Never even mentioned it again. Nobody leaves a bottle of wine or flowers or anything. At first I thought this was maybe some generational thing, but one of my guests, the DoorDash one, is 65. What the hell? I'm really ready to just say no. Edit to add a bit of clarification. These guests were all either friends or family. I don't welcome strangers, so don't get any funny ideas. And if you're about to comment that 1, I am a doormat, and or 2, no is a complete sentence, please don't bother. After hearing both several dozen times, I got the message. Really, I did. Otherwise, thanks for commenting. Emotional strain from mother-in-law jealousy. On February 22nd, my husband and I went to Costco and then to the mall, something we hadn't done in a long time. We left home around 3 p.m. and didn't return until close to 7 p.m. As soon as we walked in, my mother-in-law told my husband that she needed a few things. Without hesitation, he offered to go get them, but she quickly dismissed it, saying, "Oh, it's already dark. Don't worry about it now." That upset my husband because this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Every time he spends time with me, she suddenly needs something. Always at that exact moment. It feels as if she's subtly implying that he's neglecting her, trying to make him feel guilty for being with me. I've noticed this pattern for a long time, and I can't help but wonder if it stems from some kind of attachment issue. She becomes extremely jealous whenever my husband and I spend time together. Earlier that day, for example, I had left some dishes soaking in the sink after finishing the rest. Later, she called me out and said, "Hey, you need to wash the dishes before going upstairs." Normally, I always do, but that day, I couldn't because burnt rice was stuck to the pot. I assured her I would take care of it, but I knew her frustration wasn't really about the dishes. It was because my husband and I had spent time together. She never misses an opportunity to guilt trip him. We've only been married for 2 years, yet I feel like I can't fully enjoy my marriage. I hesitate to talk freely with my husband, to laugh, joke, go out, or even dress up, because I know her jealousy is always lurking in the background like a shadow over us. I felt this way since the day she moved in with us. At times, it even feels like a bad omen. Later that night, my husband shut himself in the office. When I asked if he wanted something to eat, he said he wasn't hungry and refused to open the door. Still, I made some ramen and eggs for us, but when I gave it to him, he wouldn't even respond. This is how he always reacts. He lets her guilt control him. She knows exactly how to manipulate him into feeling bad for spending time with me, and the cycle repeats over and over. My husband does everything for his parents. He meets all their needs by himself, yet his mother is never grateful. Instead, she constantly makes him feel guilty and controls him. Whenever he goes out with me, he has to tell her exactly where he's going, why, and what time he'll be back. I don't know what to do. Now that I'm married, I feel like I can't live my life the way I want to. No matter how small the situation, she always finds a way to interfere. Her jealousy is so intense that sometimes she won't even look at me or speak to me. Her expression is cold and dark as a room with the lights turned off. I don't know how I'm going to keep living under the same roof with someone who resents me this much. May God help me. What started as small talk at Domino's turned into my worst nightmare. This happened to me 3 years ago now, and yes, before you say anything about me being a woman or overreacting to jump on the trend of having a stalker, I did actually have one. I worked at a smaller Domino's for about 2.5 years. This happened about 6 months into me working there. I was 18 at the time, pretty much freshly 18, and was working there to pay my car payment and have a job while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. I was working a night shift with my boss, assistant manager, and a few others. My shift started at 4 in the afternoon and went until midnight, so I was a closer. About an hour into my shift, a man parked a white truck outside and walked into the building. I was working the front, so I greeted him and asked if he had an order placed already. He said yes and told me his name. His order wasn't ready yet, so I told him that it would be a few minutes. Now to me, everyone looks tall considering I'm 5'2", but this man was tall, I'd guess around 6'4". He looked older, like late 20s to early 30s, was heavier set, white, and was wearing a Wendy's uniform. Being the typically friendly person I am, I made conversation and asked if he worked at the Wendy's across the street as I had used to work there. He gave me a smile and said, "Shame, wish you still worked there for my sake." To me that was odd, and his tone definitely sounded flirtatious, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. After a bit more of some small talk, I gave him his pizza and told him to have a nice night. About 30 more minutes went by when the phone rang. I picked it up and answered it. "Thank you for calling Domino's. This is Jordan. How may I help you?" "Oh, the cute redhead that just helped me out?" My heart dropped, my suspicions being confirmed about the guy flirting with me. He asked me for my number, and I told him no thank you, and that I wasn't willing to give that information out, told him to have a good day, and hung up. I hoped that would be the end of it. To be sure, I had let both my boss and assistant manager know what had happened, and that I was uncomfortable. Luckily, they completely understood, my boss making a comment. "Not saying this is a bad thing, but you barely look 16, so he almost sounds like a pedophile." Now from an outside perspective, he could have just been being friendly. Yes, I understand that. And at that point, I could have been overreacting, you're right. But I was just uncomfortable. Fast forward to about 10 at night. I saw a white truck park outside the building, and the same man get out of the truck. I immediately turned to my assistant manager, her pulling me into the back and into the office so he couldn't see me. My boss approached the guy and asked him what he needed, but the guy just kept looking around for me. I could see this because the office had a window that sort of acted like a one-way mirror. I started crying, my manager hugging me and telling me she wasn't going to let anything happen to me. She's a big girl, not like heavy, just bigger and more built than I am. My boss spoke to the guy saying, "Look, man, she's already rejected you, and I'm not letting you see or talk to her. Get out of my store, because if you can't tell, she's fucking uncomfortable." The guy's face twisted in anger, and he stormed out of the store. He climbed into his truck, backed out of his spot so fast he spun his tires and squealed off. I had let out a sigh of relief, my boss coming to the back to check on me and let me know that I was safe, to take my time and clean myself up, and that I could go home early because that was a lot to handle. He then went back up front to run the store. My manager and I sat there and talked, her trying to make me laugh a bit while I calmed down. The phone rang in the office, and my manager answered. Later I found out it was one of our drivers. He called, asking what vehicle the guy that was harassing me drove. She told him a white truck, and he said that the guy was driving his truck around the parking lot, circling it, waiting for me to leave. My manager said, "Oh, fuck no." By the time I said what, she was already up, her taser in hand, running out of the office into the front door. She ran outside and made it go off, giving that typical shocking sound. He left the parking lot and sped off down the street. At this point, I called my dad. He was across the street at the bar. He's not an alcoholic, he just enjoys throwing darts on a Friday night. I told him to come to my work and follow my home because this creepy guy was freaking me out. Pretty quickly, my dad got there, gave me his keys and told me to drive his car, and he'd drive mine in case the guy knew what car I drove. I drove home with no issues and barely slept that night. For the next month, that guy would park in the parking lot next to my car for hours, waiting for me to leave the store. I never left while he was there. Eventually, he stopped parking and just circled the parking. What is the most Karen-like experience you've personally had with a Karen? 1. Was at the park with my daughter, she was 3 at the time. Her and a couple other kids started to play together. Then she attempted to use the monkey bars, she's a very adventurous child. About midway through, she fell. I didn't do anything because she's fallen before and I want her to learn to get back up on her own and not be scared to try again. Anyway, one of the boys was about to get on the monkey bars too, until I heard a woman run toward him screaming to stop. She picked him up and looked at my daughter. Told her it wasn't smart of her to go on the monkey bars if she wasn't fully ready, because then others might get that same idea. That's when I got up and went to my daughter's defense. Sternly told the woman to not speak to her that way, and it's no fault of hers that she wasn't scared to try something new. She took her kid and left. 2. I used to work at a fast food and a theme park when I was 18. Karen held up the line because she was demanding us to assemble a food for her daughter, which we aren't allowed to do because we go by a menu. My daughter can't have that. Well, what can you do for me? Do you want her to starve? Are one of the most irritating lines I ever encountered. 3. Asked for my manager's personal cell phone number to complain that I, 7 months pregnant at the time, would not carry a refrigerator, that she had not paid for in the cost of her room, up to her second-story room. We did not have an elevator, rather than just accept an upgrade for free because she didn't want to unpack her stuff. She refused to believe we had rooms without fridges and I was just being fat and lazy. When I refused to give her the cell phone number, she asked for corporate's number. I wrote it down on a sticky note with a smiley face. She came down later and asked to move rooms. I made her pay the difference.
Am I the a-hole for asking my girlfriend if she can take a shower? My GF really only showers once a week. Twice if I'm lucky. Typically we go to the gym together, and I've often asked her why she doesn't shower, and she always comes with things like, even sure if I started to resent her, because it was only this one thing that was bugging me in the relationship. But maybe I did, and that's my fault for being bad at communicating to her. Anyway, I couldn't hold it any longer. I tried one last time to ask if she wanted to take a shower with me, to show I did want to do stuff with her, but she declined. Then I said, "I know you say you don't sweat, but I can smell. I don't like the smell of sweat, etc., and it being a popular gym we go to, I would just appreciate if you showered a bit more." She freaked out. World War III started. She accused me of things and asked if I found her disgusting, etc. It almost felt like she wanted me to think she's disgusting for some messed up reason, like this was an easy way to create distance between us, have less sex and all that. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm overthinking it. It's just to me it feels awfully obvious to shower if not daily, at least every other day. She said she doesn't want to shower her hair often, but still, you can shower your body. Our relationship is borderline over because I hurt her, so am I the a-hole? What could I have done differently? Irrelevant, but is it normal that women shower less than men? I was always under the assumption it was the opposite.
I absolutely love my husband. I have kissed a lot of frogs, as have we all. But my husband is truly a king. With so much hate and violence in the world, he is my shining beacon. I have never known a man so in touch with his emotions and mine too. And sadly, I don't think I ever would again. I can't believe I got so lucky every day to have him next to me. I just wanted to share some hope to those of you who are currently kissing frogs that there are still decent men out there and not to give up hope. I was one date away from giving up on love, and this perfect man came bursting into my life. True love can happen even if you don't think you're fairy tale worthy. My husband's actions on Valentine's Day. My husband, 27, and I, 25F, have a 7-month-old who we both gush over how cute our baby is. Anyways, on Valentine's Day, I asked him if all he could do was stop at a store and get a small balloon on his way home from work. When he got home, our baby and I were dressed up to greet him, and he came in with a huge bouquet and huge balloon and caramel chocolates and our favorite red wine. We are very tight on money right now, so my first concern was money, but then he told me, "You let me worry about that and just enjoy these because you're worth it." And then handed the balloon to our baby, who was scared of it at first, LOL, but eventually warmed up to it, especially the clip that came with it. Then we spent the rest of the night drinking a little wine and working on a puzzle we bought forever ago. It was one of the best nights ever.
I hate my mother and I want her out of my house. My loser mom and her sister moved in with me in November, just for a few weeks, and are still here. They ridicule my shit customer service job, they leave my home a mess, and they let my house cat outside. He was missing for a month, and I just recaught him last week. This morning they let him out again. I screamed at her and she just kept egging me on, saying I'm a big guy and should hit her. How I deserve to go to jail. I truly fucking hate them. I honestly wouldn't care in the least if they both died. I kicked them both out, but I know they'll be back. I know my druggy con artist, steroid-abusing bitch of a brother won't take them in. He's refused to house these bitches. I want my cat back. He's my little buddy, and I can't fucking believe these cunts let him outside again. I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I want to scream, yell, cry. These fuckers don't care that he's all I have. Update. I didn't let them in. They called the cops. Apparently, I can't legally just say, "Get the fuck out." They have renter's rights despite not paying. So they're back. My mom won't apologize, but my aunt did. They brought KFC as a peace offering, because fried chicken makes up for losing a pet. This is my life. I can't stand it. I just want my home back and my furball back. Am I the a-hole for telling my wife she smells bad? Yesterday, I came home from work and my wife greeted me in the usual manner. While I was hugging her, I noticed she smelled pretty bad of BO. No biggie. I know she was home with the baby all day and probably gardening outside. Later in the evening, I offer to make her a bath and she jokingly asks, "Why are you saying I stink?" I honestly offered to do it just to be nice because I knew she had a long day and likes baths. But she did smell bad, so I kinda laughed and said, "Well," then she gets mad at me and says a husband isn't supposed to say his wife stinks, and she's been sore with me about it ever since. I find this a little hypocritical. She's never had a problem telling me when my farts stink, when I have morning breath, or when I don't wipe well enough, so why do I have to walk on eggshells for her over this? Am I crazy? Or is this an unfair double standard?
Insulting my husband over his comments about our daughter's boyfriend. Am I in the wrong here? So, my daughter, who is 17, has a new boyfriend who is also 17. This is her first boyfriend ever. When my daughter started dating, I was worried about her being treated badly, which is a valid concern. But after meeting her boyfriend at one of his baseball games, she met him through a friend who plays baseball. I saw that my worries were unnecessary. He is genuinely one of the sweetest people I have ever met. Every time I see him interact with the coaches, his teammates, his opponents, my daughter, etc., it is always positive. He is just generally a very soft-spoken and kind individual, always positive and happy. I also say this with no ill intent, but he is fairly short and somewhat tubby, which is relevant to my husband's opinion. I obviously do not care about this as he is a good person and quite clearly treats my daughter well. When my husband met him earlier, however, he did not seem as happy. Once he had left, he told me that he don't think he was right for our daughter. He made comments about him not being man enough. I said that our daughter clearly loves him and he clearly loves our daughter, and that I'm happy she's with someone we know is going to treat her right. My husband said that he would rather her be with a real man, not some short little gay kid. I got a little mad at this and said, "What would you rather have him be then? Some big macho man that snaps at our daughter?" He responded by saying that that would be better than some fat pansy. I told him he was just being an annoying dick to the kid, for no reason other than he doesn't think he's man enough for some stupid arbitrary reason, and that he should be supporting our daughter. He said if you'd fine with our daughter dating a fucking pansy, so be it, I guess. He stormed off, and I've been reflecting on it, and think maybe what I said was uncalled for, as he has his own perspective on these things as a dad, and I should not have started throwing around insults, as that does nothing to fix this issue for our daughter and her
What is the tiniest lie you've ever told that led to the most significant consequences? My first year walking to school alone was the 7th grade, and I was late a lot. It got to a point that the teacher told me I would have to do all the day's chores, putting chairs down in the morning, wiping boards clean, cleaning after lunch, etc., if I was late again. Well, the next day I was running late as usual. Being a lazy sob, I knew I had to do something to get out of doing the daily chores. So when the teacher asked me why I was late, I thought back on the assembly we had a few weeks prior on school safety. So I told the teacher that a strange man pulled up to me when I was coming into school grounds and asked me to come with him to see some puppies. I honestly thought that would be a good enough excuse, and it would be the end of it. Fucking nope. School was suspended for the rest of the day, police were called, my parents were called in, and I was interviewed for the entire day. Had to describe the man, the car, everything. They ended up hiring a security officer for the grounds because of that incident and put in a few new cameras. We had monthly school assemblies because of it too. And it was all for nothing, because less than a week later I was late again and had to do all the daily chores. Tell me about the most hilarious moments you've had with patients. Mine was during 3rd year of med school, 2 weeks into my 2nd block of surgery. Resident assigns me a patient to see in the morning. I go to wake him up and give my intro spiel. Then the classic, "What brings you to the hospital? What's bothering you?" Patient is a 60-something-year-old rural patient, definitely has a southern drawl. "Man, I be shitting out my deck." My eyebrows raise, partially because I was not sure if I understood him correctly. "Excuse me, sir?" My deck, grabbing his junk now and shaking it. "I'm shitting out of it, and that ain't the worst. Sometimes I fart and it got my deck flapping around like a goddamn American flag in a tornado storm." Needless to say, I chuckled, apologized, finished with him. Presented to my resident, she laughed, and didn't believe me. Went back with the team, the fellow, and attending, stood at the back of the room while the patient told them the same thing, and watched everyone try to stifle their laughter. Definitely used as many quotes as possible in my note. Gets auto-deleted after a year as a student. Hands down most entertaining rounds.
Have you ever witnessed a privileged kid getting a taste of reality? I was a school bus driver in the 70s. During height of court-ordered busing, so I ferried poor kids to the rich side of town, then rich kids the other way. Lots of entitled brats, but one stands out. Super entitled kid, constantly defying rules. Eventually, I caught him, with too many witnesses, attempting to set a bus seat on fire with his lighter. School officials were called. Hearing with officials and rich dad, and he's banned from all buses rest of semester. Dad offers to pay for the damage and quietly accepts the punishment. Then comes the surprise. Next morning when I arrive at 6 a.m. to clean my bus, regular task every morning, rich kid and dad are standing there. Dad introduces me to my new personal bus cleaner for the rest of the year. He brings kid every morning and forces him to wash and clean the floors on my bus before taking him on to his school. By end of year, entitled kid is actually working hard and being friendly. We're getting along pretty well and I help him out sometimes so he can get on to school. Kid turns out okay when all is over. Good move by his dad.
I asked my daughter what she wants to do for her birthday this weekend, and her reply made me cry. My wife died around Christmas. It wasn't natural or accidental. She lost her battle with depression, and it's been hard on us, but we have been doing our best to manage. I'm trying to be strong for my daughter. She is only 10 years old, and it was hard on her, especially because it was around the festive season. My daughter's birthday is this weekend, and while we were just chatting during dinner last night, I asked her what she wanted to do for her day. She usually looks forward to her birthday like any other kid her age and loves choosing what she gets to do. Although this time I was secretly hoping she would say something I can afford at the moment, like she wants to get McD's or something like that. But her reply completely threw me off. She told me that the only thing she wants for her birthday is to see her mom just one last time, then she burst into tears. That completely broke me. I could only hug her and comfort her all while fighting back my own tears. I know it will get better in time because we do talk about how she's feeling about everything often, and she also talks to someone at school as well, but it just tore me up and I will never forget that moment.
Am I the a-hole for breaking up with my boyfriend because of his mom? I, 17F, was dating my boyfriend, 18M, for almost a month, and things were great until I met his mom. Around Thanksgiving, I went to his house for dinner, and his mom was acting weird toward me. Later, we had to go to the grocery store, and I got in the front seat. His mom looked at me and said, "Get out. You're not special. Sit in the back." I was shocked but didn't want to start anything, so I moved. But the whole drive, she kept going on about how I wasn't special. I wasn't his wife, and I didn't deserve to sit in the front seat. I looked at my boyfriend, waiting for him to say something. He said nothing. By the time we got to the store, I was pissed, so I called an Uber and went home. About a week later, his mom texted me calling me a bitch for just leaving them there and not checking in. I told her I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but I wasn't about to tolerate disrespect from anyone. Period. Fast forward to yesterday, my boyfriend and I went on a date and his phone was blowing up. When he answered, I could hear his mom yelling at him and calling me names. I told him to hang up because once again, I felt disrespected. And again, he did nothing. Today, I agreed to hang out with his mom to try and get closer. She started talking about how her son was her baby, how much she loved him, etc. So I calmly brought up how I felt disrespected before, and she went off on me. At that point, I was done. When I got home, I told my boyfriend this relationship wasn't going to work. I tried being respectful, I tried to make it work, but I'm not going to be disrespected by his mother while he sits there and lets it happen. So, am I the a-hole? My husband of 3 years cheated while I was pregnant. I, 25F, and my husband, 27M, met 3 years ago. We have had what I believed a happy marriage. We've never fought, never had any big altercations, none of that. Anytime we have had a disagreement, we always talk and sort it out together. 3 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. We were very joyful as both of us have always wanted kids and had been trying. He was ecstatic and said we would go through this journey together. 5 months ago, before I found out I was pregnant, a new neighbor moved in. It was nothing special. We said hi but never interacted. About exactly 4 weeks ago, my husband started acting strange, coming home late, missing my calls and etc. I never batted an eye because I trusted my husband, and we would always watch shows that involved cheating, and he would add that he finds people like that repulsing and disgusting. Anyway, I didn't bat an eye until he came home very late, smelling like Sexy Secret. I just want to make it clear, I do not wear Sexy Secret. Due to the fact that the smell makes me sick, I don't own it. But last year, me and my husband visited my sister who lives overseas and she owns Sexy Secret and it made me sick, so it's not mine. He came home and went to the kitchen acting cold and went to eat leftovers. Eat leftovers? He left his jacket on the couch and I just went through it to see if he brought gum. I saw his phone and just felt something pushing me to open it, so I did. I opened his messages to find multiple messages from our neighbor. He had her saved as her name. He probably did because we have trust built and never check each other's phones. Messages contains nude pictures and flirty messages about how to meet up and how much he wants her. I switched off the phone, my heart pounding, and I was shaking. This is the day after that happened yesterday. I don't know what to do, I'm pregnant, and I want to try and help our marriage, and I don't want to raise a child of divorce or alone. I'm going through different stages: denial, scared, and anger. I don't know what to do, and I'm writing this for advice.
911 dispatchers, what was the first call that made you cry? I worked night shift this night. I answer an emergency call and end up being told there were shots fired and the bullets came through the house. The mother was making sure everyone was okay, and they walked into their 7-year-old child's room and found a bullet hole through the wall that hit him right in the chest. The screech that came from the mother's mouth absolutely put me on fight or flight. As I was trying to get more information out of her, she's telling the kid, "Baby, keep your eyes open. Don't die on me. Breathe, baby, breathe." She's screaming. Everyone walks in and sees the child, the father, mother, siblings. Everyone is screaming and crying. It's absolutely hectic. All I hear is, "Mommy loves you. Everyone loves you." In that moment, I knew they were holding the child in their arms. I can hear it all. Long story short, we dispatched our resources to get help to them ASAP. When the officer came over the radio, a grown man, was absolutely devastated. Honestly, it sounded like he was crying when giving updates to us. The child ended up dying, and I got off the phone. I was stunned for a moment. I didn't feel teary-eyed or anything. Then I started to cry. The tears just came pouring out and I couldn't control them. My supervisor told me to step out, they called a chaplain, and I was sent home early. Within the next day, I showed up to work like nothing ever happened. I got calls all the time about shootings and deaths, and that was my first time ever crying about one.
What's the most disturbing secret you've discovered about someone close to you? The 24 hours before my dad died, stage 4 lung cancer, he was in the ER and then the ICU, and we were unable to be with him because of hospital COVID rules. My mother, sister, and myself had been texting and calling him all day and got no response. My mother even called the hospital and spoke with one of his ICU nurses who said he was awake and communicating fine. He passed very quickly at 3:30 a.m. the next morning. We were allowed to be at his bedside, but by then he was no longer conscious, so we said our goodbyes and he was gone. Later that morning, while my mom slept, I was calling cremation services to schedule his body for pickup at the hospital, and going through his bag of belongings the hospital had returned to us. His phone was in there, and I wanted to read all our texts and take some comfort in my last words to him. I opened his phone and all our texts had not been read, not mine or my mom and sister's. I thought this was so odd, but figured he must have been suffering so much he couldn't find the strength. I began to scroll through his apps and noticed a chat app I'd vaguely heard of. I can't recall the name, but it essentially works like WhatsApp. I opened the app and saw a single contact with a female name. I started reading and realized my dad has been chatting with this girl hourly for the last 24 hours and as far back as I could scroll. He was calling her princess and telling her he loved her, and she was saying she was scared for him and wanted to know what was going on, why was he in the ER, etc. I scrolled back enough to know that this was someone he was having at the very least an emotional affair with. My grief was completely hijacked by hurt and anger, and a week later I tracked the girl down and spoke to her, via DMs, and found out she was 19 years old. She was 17 when they met. He was her high school bus driver, and she told me they had been dating for almost 2 years. My dad was 66 years old when he died, and dating someone younger than his grandchildren, someone he chose to spend his last moments with and say his last goodbyes to. I hope it made him happy, but it sure is a shitty secret to live the rest of my life with. A secret that will forever overshadow my entire relationship with my dad, with no chance to ever speak to him about it. It's the one secret I wish I'd never found out.
What happened at that sleepover when you were a kid that made you feel like you never wanted to go to that person's house ever again? 1. I pooped in the toilet and flushed. Toilet stopped up. I was like 9, so not like grown-ass man turds, and the whole family yelled at me for not asking if it was okay to flush. I got a tummy ache and called my parents to come get me. 2. The mother accused me of stealing $50. When I tried to leave to go home, she blocked the door and insisted she drive me home. I bolted out of the door when she went to get her keys. Turns out she just didn't want me to spend the night, but thought accusing me of theft was the best way to get me to leave. 3. I slept over at my female cousin's house, or more accurately, my recently divorced uncle's house, while his daughter, my cousin, was visiting. We were like 12. He went out and we had the house to ourselves, but early in the morning at like 3 a.m., we awoke to horrible shouting and swearing outside. We look out the window and my uncle, her dad, is fucking a homeless, mentally ill woman on the curb who is ranting and raving and swearing loudly. Literally, right under a streetlight illuminating the whole scene. I could tell my cousin had seen some similar shit before by her reaction.
Friends of psychopaths or sociopaths. What were the signs that made you realize your friend was different? 1. He could not comprehend the difference between harmless pranks and cruelty, which manifested in high school. Got so far that he broke into a friend's home, stole her TV, then got angry that her family called the police over a prank. Trying to talk to him about the difference between pranks and crime was met by a blank stare, almost confusion, followed by vicious mocking. I didn't see him much after that, then completely cut ties with him after he started casually talking about raping women. 2. She let me read a written complaint from someone who claimed to have been bullied by her. It was very detailed, too detailed to be made up, but she denied all of it and played innocent. She showed it to me to gain my support against the accusations. A few months later, she started bullying me with the exact same methods described in the complaint.
What's the biggest bullet you've ever dodged? 1. Stopped duck hunting with a guy because he would put his 12-gauge Remington 1100 on his shoulders with no thought to where the barrel was pointing. I'd tell him to point it the other way, or I'd stop and move to the other side, but he'd shift it around, and it would end up pointing at my head when we were walking. I told him I wouldn't hunt with him anymore, and he was pissed at me and called me a fucking pussy, and that there was no danger because the safety was on. A couple weeks later, he told me he had an accidental discharge with the gun on his shoulder. 2. I matched with a guy on Tinder who played for the Atlanta Falcons. He was really charming and seemed nice. He asked me to fly down to Atlantic City for Memorial Day weekend, said he would pay for everything, airfare, hotel, food, etc. But I had never met him before and he refused to give me his phone number. I was uncomfortable flying to meet a stranger, so I told him no. 2 weeks later, he was on the news for kicking and killing his girlfriend's dog. 3. Years ago, I was on a first meet for an internet date. We met at a bar and the bartender carded us. Even though we were both older, they were doing stings in the area, so he was carding every single person. Handed mine right over, but my date was an ass about it. The bartender checked mine and handed it back to me. He checked his, and rather than handing it back to him, he placed it on the bar right in front of me. It had the sexual offender stamp on it. The guy picked it up, looked at the bartender, looked at me, and then got up and walked out. I immediately Googled him. He was on the registry and had been in prison for grape. Lesson learned, always Google. The bartender and I are still friends. 4. I used to roller skate as a kid outside my house down a hill and never wore any kind of protection. Suddenly, one day before I go out, my older brother tells me I can't leave unless I put on a helmet, which is weird since he's never cared before. Anyways, I do it, and that day, for the first time ever, I fell and landed on the back of my head so hard that the helmet cracked. That crack would have probably been my skull had I not worn it.
My best friend demanded I postpone my pregnancy for her wedding. My really good friend Sarah, 31F, is getting married in August. I am a bridesmaid in her wedding and have been helping her plan more than her maid of honor. For some background, before I get into the story, I, 30F, and my 31M husband have been planning on having kids for years. We have been together for 15 years, and it's been something we've wanted for a long time, but we had some obstacles. I needed a major surgery that took over a year to recover from. I needed to be fully recovered before we could start trying. I worked so hard on physical therapy and did everything I could to heal and be healthy. We got the green light in November, we tried my next cycle, and we got pregnant first try. We were not expecting for us to get pregnant on our first try, but it just feels like that was meant to be. Back to the issue, the only thing her maid of honor has actually done is plan the bachelorette trip. When we got the dates for everything, almost a year ago right after my surgery, I told Sarah and her MOH that depending on how my recovery was going, and if we would be able to start trying for a baby, I may not be able to travel regardless of pregnancy due to my surgery recovery because this was a really intense surgery. So I told them at this moment in time, I can't commit to a trip in July of 2025. We were having this conversation in May of 2024, so Plan and I will touch base, and if can't tag along due to things needing to be booked far ahead, then I can sit some stuff out, like meaning no one needs to change any plans for me at all, and nothing needs to be delayed on planning on my behalf. I also told them that I understand that things need to be planned way in advance, and I asked when is the absolute latest I have to let them know if I'm going or not. They told me April 2025. I then got pushed back asking if we can postpone trying for a baby. I said we will see what happens. I don't know when I'll be cleared, and I might not even get pregnant right away, so it might not be an issue. Last week I met Sarah for our monthly brunch. I made her a shirt that says Auntie, and told her the news. She was not happy about it one bit. She started crying saying, how could I do this to her? And she said she couldn't believe I went behind her back. She said she assumed I would not try to get pregnant by my comment saying we might not get pregnant right away. She's upset I'll be going into my 9th month of pregnancy in August, and I'll be 8 months when the beach trip is, and that I'm flaking out on the trip. I told her that I'm not flaking out on anything because I didn't commit to the trip, and told them to do what they need to do without me. She just stood over me screaming at me. I just let her scream at me, and then told her in the calmest voice I could muster while fighting tears that I was sorry she feels that way. She then threw the shirt I made her on the ground and stormed out of the restaurant. I then get a text from her that was meant to go to someone else, I'm assuming her MOH, that said, you're right, she could miscarry. I just feel like her being that pregnant will take attention away from me on my day. I replied and said, well, don't worry, I won't be a bridesmaid anymore if you feel that way. She has been blowing up my phone since then, apologizing, but I can't bring myself to talk to her. Editing to add, I'm not going to continue on being friends with her. I was just going to ghost her because I shouldn't have to explain why I don't want to be friends with her anymore after all of that. Am I the a-hole if I divorce my husband for not wiping his butt? Yep. This is pretty much the title. My husband recently started saying that he is not going to wipe his butt anymore after using the restroom. He got into his head that alpha males do not wipe, therefore he no longer is doing it. He has been, for the past 2 days, been walking around everywhere we going telling guys alphas don't wipe. He is very serious about not wiping and he is not listening to reasoning. I don't know what to do and I fear that this might be the start of the end of our marriage. How do I convince him to wipe?
My GF got mad that I didn't defend her, but she was clearly in the wrong. Had dinner with my GF and some friends last night and it got awkward fast. One of my friends called her out on something pretty mild, basically just saying she was being kind of rude to the waiter. She had an attitude the whole night, rolling her eyes and being snappy. I wasn't about to jump in and defend that, so I just kind of sat there. After we left, she went off on me, saying I should have had her back no matter what. I told her I'm not going to blindly defend someone when they're actually wrong, and now she's pissed, calling me disloyal. My take is, if you're being rude, you should own it, not expect people to cover for you. But she says partners should be a team no matter what. Am I the a-hole for not backing her up?
Am I overreacting for considering divorcing my husband who doesn't want to be with me for the birth of our child? I'm 33F, he's 40M. We have 2 kids together and a third on the way. Just last night we had friends over for dinner and we were talking about childbirth and what it was like with our first 2, and he said that he didn't even want to be there for the birth of this one because it's too traumatizing for him, and that he wants my mom, who lives in a different country and has Parkinson's, to come be there with my in the delivery room instead. He said he doesn't want to be in the room and deal with my shouting and screaming and saying the F word over and over because it's too stressful for him. Like, I'm sorry I was in pain while giving unmedicated birth to our beautiful, healthy children. He's never mentioned to me that he doesn't want to be there for the birth. This is the first time it's come up, and it was in front of other people, which was kind of embarrassing. To be honest, if this were the only issue in our marriage, I would chalk it up to him just having a few too many beers and maybe being a bit too blunt about it. But there have been so many other instances that prove to me he doesn't prioritize me, and I'm so sick of it. Am I overreacting? Would I be an absolute idiot to divorce him while I'm pregnant with our third child? Am I the bad guy for making my brother's fiancé take a paternity test before paying for their wedding? I, 32F, has a younger brother, 28M, and has always been a bit impulsive. He met his fiancée, Emma, 27F, last year, and within 6 months they were engaged. A month after that, she got pregnant. Our family was shocked but supportive. My parents are not wealthy, but I've done well for myself, and my brother asked if I could help pay for their wedding. I agreed, with one condition: a paternity test. Before you judge, hear me out. Emma was dating someone else right before getting together with my brother. I have nothing against her, but the timeline of her pregnancy made me suspicious. My brother is positive the baby is his, but I wasn't convinced. If I was going to shell out $20K for a wedding, I wanted to make sure he wasn't being played. Emma was furious. She called me cruel and said I was trying to humiliate her. My brother was torn but eventually agreed because he really needed the money. The test came back. He's the father. I apologized and I thought that was the end of it. But Emma refuses to forgive me. She disinvited me from the wedding and told my brother she never wanted to see me again. My brother is upset but says he has to side with his future wife. My parents think I was out of line, but some friends say I was just being cautious. So, AITA for making her take a paternity test before paying for their wedding?